Andrew Hogue here for AndrewHogue.com, being Australia's only 24/7 rock metal radio station. And the last time I saw this lad was on the stages of the Kirk Hammett Horror Festival in San Francisco in February. We're talking about the mighty Carcass, being axeman Bill Steer. The band will be back in Australia shortly for a well-deserved and return tour to, of course, give us a slab of their new release, Surgical Steel. We'll welcome Bill now to AndrewHogue.com. G'day, Bill. How you doing?
Very good. How's yourself?
I'm doing really well. And again, it was an honour to, check out you playing at the Kirk Hammett Festival. Certainly a very different musical festival for most bands to be playing. What were your thoughts on the actual event itself?
It was a really nice vibe. Quite lucky to be invited. I suppose it's different because it wasn't primarily a music festival, as you said. It was the whole horror angle, so there was a lot of people there who were there purely for that. And then, of course, there were the people who were just there to be around Kirk Hammett. And then the remainder, I guess, were there to see the bands. It was a good blend, really. I don't know, socially it was really cool.
Now, of course, the record Surgical Steel has just exploded since it's been released, and it's been out for over a year now. And it's an album, or it's an album that a lot of fans didn't even expect it was going to happen. And I know you've covered these sort of conversations before. Are you still surprised by the reaction even now after its release, that it's still sort of snowballing into a sort of another dimension, because old and new fans have just latched on?
Yeah, we are very surprised. We're not the kind of people to go into anything with particularly high expectations. We'd rather just focus on doing what we do and not make any assumptions about the future. So when we started to get this kind of response to the album, I think everybody was quite shocked, but pleasantly so. The amount of negativity we received was so much less than I'd anticipated, just because it's that kind of climate. Even if you do something good, the internet provides a nice little forum for people who just want to slate bands. And,
of course.
We expected so much more of that. Most of the reviews I saw were just incredibly positive. It was kind of a mind blower at the time, really.
Well, let's go back to, pre-internet days, of course, when the Heartwork record came out, and that was sort of early 90s. And around mid is kind of when a lot of people say now, in reflection, that, metal was on its way out and it was sort of dead. But, the album was received very well, but compared to the sort of hysteria that Heartwork receives today, it's almost like that album could have been put out yesterday, and a lot of people are still jumping all over it, just the same as At the Gate, Slaughter of the Soul. Now, moving forward, and after Swan Song and then the band sort of going on a, hiatus, I guess, going into making a brand new record, and of course now being with the internet, there's a whole new realm of opinion that's sort of out there. I don't think any band is can escape that. What was your mindset to make a new record with the knowing of what's sort of out there these days when it comes to critical appraise or critical slagging?
Well, during the writing and recording, we were kind of insulated from it all. We hadn't told anybody we were making records besides our immediate family and friends. So it wasn't common knowledge, and that just kept the pressure off nicely. You could just concentrate your mind and focus on music. So that was a really blissful period. It was only when the album was completed and you realized it was shortly going to be out there in the public domain, that was when I personally started to get a little bit nervous. Because, as I said, we were bracing ourselves for a fair bit of slagging. We definitely were confident enough to know that the hardcore Carcass people would love the album, but we didn't think it would go anywhere beyond that. So, as I say, surprising.
Do you find that pretty much no band, can escape the flack that happens? But do you find too that a band like Carcass, who have had such a great career and a very diverse one too, considering the origins of the band's music, it's almost like a damned if they do, damned if they don't. If they try something different, people slag them. If they sort of release a similar sounding album, others are going to slag it. But I find that with Surgical Steel, it literally wasn't really met with that kind of approach at all. I think people just seem to have just lapped it up, that they're grateful that they got another Carcass album, and the fact that again, like a lot of the new generation fans are completely all over the record. Does that prove to you that the last 15 years hasn't really been that great when it comes to bands releasing good original heavy metal?
That's an interesting point. I don't know if I'm best qualified to comment there, because I'm kind of in a time warp when it comes to heavy music.
Could leave that one for Walker. He'll have a good response for that one.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I quite intentionally just stay in my comfort zone of listening to, you know, classic early heavy metal and hard rock from the 70s and 80s. Of course, I like the original death metal bands, you know, the people that kicked it off, you know, bands like Death and Repulsion. But beyond that, I've really got no interest, to be honest. But yeah, I guess maybe I'm not the first person to venture that opinion, that things have been a little bit slow creatively in extreme metal. But I think it's kind of inevitable, because, you know, you're always going to have lulls in any genre of music. You know, when a genre first explodes, it's very exciting and very alive, and there's an element of danger to it because it's new. And extreme metal is now, well, I wouldn't say part of the mainstream, but it's represented in mainstream music to a degree. If you look at the success of bands like Slipknot and so forth. So I think, yeah, there's still room to innovate, and you can make good music, but you probably can't rock people the way some of the early bands did.
Now, obviously, after the sort of Carcass hiatus, you know, sort of delved into, again, like you mentioned, sort of early sort of 70s rock that you were getting into with a lot of the Firebird stuff, which I was a big fan of as well. And when it sort of came back to playing sort of extreme metal, was it a bit of a challenge to sort of, you know, get back into that mindset of playing that sort of music again?
Not really. I mean, I've been asked this question a few times over the last couple of years. And I expected it to be really hard, because I really hadn't played that music at all since the day Carcass broke up. And as you pointed out, I've been doing something very different, playing in a completely different tuning, on different gear, different dynamics. Everything was just almost like the opposite of what I'd been doing with Carcass. So to go back to it, yeah, I was wondering if I was going to be able to cut it. But as soon as I picked up a guitar tuned to B and started jamming, the feel was still there, and I guess that music was just programmed into me. I mean, there were so many years where that was just my life. You know, I played that stuff every single day for years. So it's almost like a muscle memory thing, I would say. You know, it's a really fun thing to do. It's very therapeutic playing this music.
I saw you guys at Loud Park in Japan last year as well, and seeing the response from fans of a lot of the newer stuff was just quite crazy, because the album had sort of just been out for a few months, and a lot of people tend to just sort of sometimes have a bit of a lukewarm response to new music, and they want to hear the hits.
Oh, yeah.
But just seeing how much of the new music blended with the old set, even though to me it's a new feel for Carcass, it's not a sort of a carbon sort of copy of Heartwork Mark II. Blended incredibly well. Are you finding that whole sort of process when you're playing, putting set lists together, about how the songs certainly fit, even though they're still their own entity?
Yeah, we were not prepared for that, really. We knew we had to play something off the new record live, because if you don't, that's a cop-out. It's almost like indicating a lack of faith in your own stuff. But we were very cautious. We thought we can put 2 or 3 numbers in the set, and chances are the audience might taper off a little bit during those tunes. But it just didn't turn out to be the case. If anything, the energy level raised. And I'm not fully sure why, if it's because loads of people in the crowd have the record and like it, or if it's maybe because they're responding to our energy. Because I think probably we tackle those tunes with just a little bit more intensity or something, because it's more recent. I don't know. All I know is when we're up there, it just feels really seamless, going from an old number into something off the new record and back again. A track like Unfit for Human Consumption, it's just very odd, night after night, seeing how well it goes down. I would never have anticipated that, to be honest.
Has it sort of restored your faith in fans liking heavy music? Because as we said earlier on, there's so many different bands out there today, so many more subgenres, so much more segregation, that, you know, people can write off a band that's been around for a number of years and lose interest. But it just doesn't seem like that's happened to Carcass at all. And do you see some of the music that the band has made in the past as somewhat timeless? Because when you listen to Heartwork, especially to my ears, it literally feels like it was recorded yesterday. It is very timeless sounding, you know, music. Do you feel the same way about, you know, the past Carcass material when you listen back to it?
I guess I do to a degree, because the very fact that we're able to discuss this today, and my band is able to go out there and play the tunes to packed clubs, I guess all of that says that it stood the test of time to some degree. It's brilliant because Heartwork wasn't particularly well received when we did the album, and we broke up, you know, a couple of years later, and went off to do our various things. But while we were away, I guess it grew in stature. It actually found an audience and a following years and years after we'd created it. And that's a nice feeling, because, yeah, maybe our timing was off back then, but it sort of all came together a bit further down the line. I enjoy the records, you know, if I'm out and about and you hear it somewhere. I think Colin's production is fantastic on it, and, you know, we had some decent tunes.
Now, a lot of bands can certainly get productions like that in their bedrooms these days, but do you think, you know, there's something lacking today aside from people completely using the technology, which is well beyond our wildest dreams, that the things you can do? Do you think that there's a more of a reliance on that, and there's a lack of soul and originality in a lot of what, you know, some bands are trying to do, new and old? Yeah,
I would definitely go along with that, to be honest. It's hard to conclude otherwise, because I think the technology is making, not everybody, but a large number of musicians quite lazy. You know, I'd rather hear human beings on album. I want to hear the human element. I'd like to get the feeling that I'm listening to a performance. I mean, obviously, when you do a record, you tart things up. You craft them until you're happy with it. I get that. But it's almost like some people are trying to strip any kind of human element from the record and get it to be absolutely perfect, which is just boring to me. When I hear tunes like that, which are blatantly click track, everything's on the grid, the chorus has been copied and pasted all over the place, I just switch off. It's like there's nothing happening that makes me want to carry on listening. So I guess that's a big part of what's going on. It's a complicated subject. I mean, it's being debated a lot right now, I guess. Do you
think it's going to eventually sort of subside? Even my issue I've had is also, I've talked to Thomas from Sugar and plenty of other bands about the loudness wars that are happening, where a lot of bands are over compressing their music to the point where it just distorts on listening, and most people don't seem to sort of notice that or even worry about it being a problem, when sometimes I think a lot of bands have amazing talent, but that is an area that becomes a bit of a letdown.
Yeah, I mean, I almost try not to think too much about that, because that's just another side of things where, like you said, it's getting too much. Like, people having their records mastered so that it's super loud, but it's also unlistenable, because there's absolutely no oxygen in the music. You know, you can kill the dynamics on an album by mastering it that way. And it's been said before, people do have a volume knob on their stereo. But I also get what the problem is with some of these people, because they're desperate to be noticed. There's a lot of competition out there for all of us. Anything that gives you an edge and grabs people's attention, even for a few seconds, I can understand how that might feel like it's worth it. But, you know, I'd rather avoid it with our band, because, you know, we're trying to make records that will actually stand up to repeated listening, rather than just, you know, giving people earache for a few seconds or whatever.
Have you thought ahead of, Surgical Steel? Of course, you've been touring quite relentlessly since the record's been released, but, obviously with the reaction, there must be a pretty strong drive and motivation to keep the Carcass train moving along.
You're right, there is. There's plenty of incentive there, and speaking for myself, I'd love to do another record. I've heard Jeff say similar things, and I know Dan would love to. We're just going to take it as it comes, really, because obviously we're still some way into our touring schedule. We're not really going to be done with that until, I don't know, towards the end of November, I think. So we can't realistically even look at new material till December. We'll take it from there. All I know is we would want the next record to be very strong indeed. So as long as it takes, that's all I can say. Not that we're anticipating a very long time in the studio, but just we'll spend as long writing as we need to. Because, you know, you get very conscious of the passing of time, especially when you're at the age that Jeff and myself are at. So you don't want to waste your time or the audience's with something that's mediocre.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about those tour dates. Of course, you are kicking off your first show on the 12th of June in Perth at the Capitol, the 13th in Brisbane at the Hi-Fi, the 14th in Sydney at the Metro Theatre, and wrapping up the 15th in Melbourne at 170 Russell. We can get you to choose your favourite song from Surgical Steel and also one of your favourite Carcass tracks of all time from the back catalogue.
Okay. Well, as far as Surgical Steel goes, I suppose my current favourite song would be Mount of Execution. Probably because it feels like it was probably the biggest achievement on the album in terms of incorporating some new elements that haven't been heard on previous Carcass records. It's also, by coincidence, the longest song we've done to date. And it's a tune we didn't think would make it to the record. We initially thought it would just be a bonus track, but by the time it was all done, I think everyone had just fallen in love with it, and we knew it had to be the closer. So that's that one. If you're talking about the older period of Carcass and Heartwork and so forth, I'd probably have to be fairly predictable and go with something like No Love Lost.
Okay, cool. Just a quick one. Give us a bit of an update on how Ken's doing.
He's great. He's been very, very level and together for a number of years now. I mean, the whole story of what happened to him and his recovery following that, I mean, there truly is a book in it, if you care to sit down and write it. But the short version is, I mean, he's done incredibly well to get to this point where his health is stable, he's got a busy social life, quite a few hobbies. There's no such thing as an empty day for Ken. I mean, he's always busy. When we play the UK, that's when he tends to come and join us for shows. Overseas, not so much these days. Partly because of the travel involved, but also partly because he has got quite a busy schedule, and we're always reminding people that Carcass is just a part of Ken's life, but he's always had other things going on. So, I think, of course, there's going to be an element of sadness for all of us that he's not able to play drums in the band now. But we're also realists, and that's what's happened. And the best way to look at it is it's just incredible that he's made it this far, because he was so close to death for such a long time. He didn't just make it through, he actually got his life back on track in a really great way. And as a human being, he has not changed a bit, same sense of humour and everything.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. I remember I was actually with him side stage at Varken before he got up and did a bit of a drum solo with you guys, and that was just an incredible moment to witness. And I'm sure you would have felt the exact same thing, just seeing exactly what he's gone through.
That was, I mean, it wasn't the greatest set for us for various reasons, but that just lifted up everything. I mean, when he came on stage, that was the one point when I actually really noticed a very, very strong reaction from the crowd. And I know he was completely psyched up about it as well. So yeah, I mean, in that phase, he was doing quite a few festivals with us, and that was always the high point, to be really honest. When he came on stage, people used to just go nuts.
Yeah, good times. Well, let's check out some Carcass right now. Thanks again for your time, Bill. Look forward to having you back in Australia shortly.
Brilliant. All right, thank you.
No worries. This is Carcass here on andrewhogue.com.